Greetings, everyone. Wilkinson here. Today I have another author here. He is David Eugene Perry. Well, before we talk about you, I want to say hi to my peeps.
Hello, everyone.
Why don't we just dig in? We'll talk about the book, of course, but we're going to get a little bit of personal information too. So why don't you tell us a little about yourself? What's your story?
Well, first of all, Wilkinson, it's a great pleasure to be here. Live in Palm Springs now, full-time with my husband, Alfredo Casuso. I definitely married up. He's originally from Spain. And a few years ago, after the election of he who shall not be named, we decided, I think maybe it's a good time to get that second passport. So I am now also not only a U.S. citizen, but a Spanish citizen. So I'm happy about that.
No fair.
I know. Makes getting through lines when you fly internationally easier, too. There is that. It's like, use the Spanish passport. Wow. Originally from Richmond, Virginia, old family, as I used to say in Virginia, they call us an FFV, First Families of Virginia, meaning we came over in the 1620s. But I don't know if there was any money there by the time it got to my family. It was all gone. Rural Virginia family, tobacco farmers, and then they moved to Richmond. I'm one of only two people in my family that went to college. Knew I was gay from an early age, like everyone who... I shouldn't say everyone who admits that, but I think most people understand at some age. I remember at 5 years old seeing a drawing of a caveman in the Compton's Encyclopedia hauling in a net and said, wow, he looks sexy. So I knew. So the best way for me to come out was I went to theater school in upstate New York, State University of New York, moved to D.C., worked for the National Endowment for the Arts, and moved to San Francisco in 1986, and best decision I ever made.
Why?
Well, in the 1980s, being a 24-year-old single man, that awful thing called AIDS was around. Terrible time to be single and try to navigate the social world. And in San Francisco, of course, it was an issue. I mean, I remember looking for apartments, and there were all these for rent signs on Castro and pictures of men with Kaposi sarcoma. But in a sense, it was clear that during an awful pandemic that was so devastating, especially to the gay population, San Francisco was a safe haven. And I've always thought that. And Palm Springs, there's so many men here, especially from San Francisco, that have moved here over the last few years. I call it the Castro diaspora. So I'm very much a San Franciscan, but also now full-time living here in Palm Springs with my husband, a Palm Springer or a Palm Springian. Not sure which that should be.
Are you in Palm Springs proper or one of the other towns or what?
No, we are right in the rich heart of Palm Springs, 92264.
Oh, what neighborhood you in?
Los Compadres near Smoke Tree. I love the fact that we look out our front window and I see the Bob Hope house, and right next to it, something that's even more important to me, the house that I call the Bambi and Thumper house, the house that was featured in James Bond's Diamonds Are Forever, my favorite James Bond film. I'm a huge James Bond fan.
I didn't know that house was in there.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Bambi and Thumper. If those people who know James Bond will know it is the Bambi and Thumper house.
Wow. So did you have an actual coming out process?
I did. I was the best little Catholic boy in the world, altar boy, all of that. 12 years parochial school, then parochial Catholic military school, which if you aren't Catholic in the South sounds like a very strange thing, but trust me, it makes a lot of sense. Catholic military school, Benedictine Military Institute. And as I say, I knew I was gay for a long time. I prayed about it. I knew it wasn't supposed to be good. And on my way to college, literally the night before I went to college, I stopped and visited a good friend in Washington, D.C., and he was a member of a group of gay Catholics called Dignity. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Dignity met in Georgetown at one of the chapels, and the Catholic Church had no trouble with it. And they invited me to go one night, and I still had not come out. I was 18 years old, 18. Okay. So we went to the Mass, which was very emotional for me. My mother had died the year before, and I was at a very tender spot in my life. And then we went dancing afterwards to the Frat House, which is a great old bar in D.C. in DuPont Circle. And they said, well, this is a gay bar, David. Is that okay? I was like, no, it's okay. I'm not gay, but I'm liberal. Yeah, I'm liberal. And I was standing behind one of these little banquettes. All the other men were dancing, and suddenly they put on Diana Ross's song Upside Down. Well, I couldn't take it a second more. I turned to my friend and said, I want to dance. And he very archly said, there's only boys here. I said, okay, I'm gay. Let's dance, because if we don't dance now, the song's going to be over. So he announces to the bar, David's just come out. So they picked me up, this group of gay men, and paraded me around the dance floor like something out of Salome. It was quite a memorable coming out experience. I came out on the floor of the frat house.
Wow.
August 27th, 1980. And that night also, I lost my virginity. It was a memorable day.
Oh, wow. Big day.
Yeah, and I didn't go to confession the next day.
No?
I was fine. Yeah, I was fine.
And were you fine afterward?
I was fine afterwards. It was my closet door had been blown off.
Wow. So how old were you when you went to San Fran?
Let's see, that would have been 1986, so I was 24.
24. Okay.
24, and I love San Francisco. I was just there last week. My husband and I still have a good many clients there. We're still very much in business. We're not retired. And I'm on the board of directors of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. We work with the tourist industry there. I love San Francisco. And for all those people who put it down and say, oh, it's going through a bad period. Well, San Francisco has known boom and busts. That's why the Phoenix is its symbol. It'll come back. What
made you go there originally?
Oh, my friends had moved there from Washington and Virginia. I was the last homosexual left in the Old Dominion. So wow. I remember my first day in San Francisco was October 1st, 1986, Castro Street Fair. And I don't know how familiar you are with San Francisco, but that's the street fair that Harvey Milk founded. Right. And it just was this outpouring of gay, wonderful San Francisco energy. I remember I asked someone later if it was a gay event, and they said, well, it's just really San Francisco. And that's when I made the decision to move. I came out, loved it, and went back and spent the next couple of months finding a job. My first job in San Francisco was at San Francisco Opera. Great place for a new gay arrival from San Francisco to work, San Francisco Opera. At some point, everyone comes through those doors.
Oh. So you met a lot of people?
A lot.
What was your next job?
After at the opera, I actually thought, oh my goodness, I can do PR on my own. And I had a little Apple IIc computer, and I opened my own PR business with a floppy disk.
No way.
Yeah, my husband Alfredo says it's a pity you don't have that computer. It could be in the computer museum now. And I did PR freelance. I also was a freelance writer for many years. I wrote for The Advocate. At one point, I had the top-selling issue of The Advocate. I interviewed Bob Paris and Rod Jackson Paris. I don't know if you remember. They were the bodybuilding couple. They became very famous. They came out and they were beautiful, and I interviewed them.
Did Herb Ritz photograph them?
Yeah, Herb Ritz photographed them, and they were really lovely. And I was a big aficionado of bodybuilders. So that was an easy interview for me. But it was the highest-selling issue of The Advocate until that Madonna person got interviewed, and well, that killed my record.
Oh well. So what made you into PR?
Well, as you know, I said I went into school in theater and voice. I played piano since I was 5 years old. I paid for college by playing piano and singing in a nightclub near my college, Fredonia, New York. Monday through Thursday, I waited tables at this restaurant. And Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at the same restaurant, I played piano and sang. So my degree helped me. My grandmother always used to say in Richmond, son, as long as you can play the piano, you'll always work. And that was true. It bothers me now. I don't play as much as I used to, but I do still have a piano. Anyway, I realized early on that as much as I loved being on stage and I have no problem speaking in public, I really enjoyed organizing behind the scenes. And one summer during summer stock, in addition to being an actor, they always give you another job to do. And they said, well, can you write? Can you type? I said, yeah, I type really fast. They said, great, you're in PR. And they gave me a news release to write about Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale. This was in Champlain, New York, the Champlain Shakespeare Festival. And I remember one of the other people who was working in the office said, we were doing versions of the press release, and she wrote, Shakespeare's longest play. And I said, I just don't think that's a selling point. And that was my introduction to my PR life of trying to take complex things and make them simple. So I fell into PR.
What was the selling point? Do you remember?
Oh, my goodness. So The Winter's Tale? I forget now. I studied Shakespeare, and I can't remember any quotes from it. I just remember that saying Shakespeare's longest play would be like saying, hi, let's spend 6 hours watching Parsifal.
Right.
Yeah, where's the bar?
So what do you do now? Besides write books.
Yeah, my husband Alfredo and I still run our PR business, David Perry and Associates, and we have a number of different clients, restaurants. I won't do any plugs here, but we have clients both in San Francisco and Palm Springs. And I love doing that because I like communicating. I like taking complex messages and making them simple. I'm one of those people who think social media, it can be a great gift, but it can also be a great danger because it makes you sometimes want to not be totally positive. So I don't buy into that. I think social media is a great, great tool for communications. I don't call it public relations anymore. I call it communications. And then when I'm not working, my husband and I love to travel. We've been to between the two of us over 60, 70 countries. I worked aboard ship, I think, as I said. And
well, they
I
don't
lecture.
know that. I know that.
You know that, but the audience doesn't know that. I worked aboard ship in 98. I worked my way around the world writing the newspaper for the passengers aboard Crystal Symphony. And after that experience, I was asked to come back and lecture. So now, once or twice a year, my husband and I get a free trip in exchange for me, as Alfredo likes to say, nattering on about old sunken ships. That's my hobby.
What made you like old sunken ships?
Oh, goodness.
I'm curious.
Well, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and we spent our summers, or part of our summers, at Virginia Beach and on the Chesapeake Bay. And even then, it was clear that I was gay. My brother and my father wanted to fish, and I just wanted to lay on the deck and get sun. And we would always sail out past the Newport News Navy Yard, which is still the largest, if I think it's still the largest Navy base in the world. And I was fascinated. I couldn't get over these beautiful ships. I was just fascinated. And then one night on the late movie in Richmond, my mother and I saw Titanic. That's the original Titanic with Clifton Webb and Barbara Stanwyck.
Okay.
And two things. It was quite clear to me that even though Clifton Webb was supposed to be married to Barbara Stanwyck, he was gay as a coot. And Barbara Stanwyck's daughter fell in love with a very young, very handsome Robert Wagner. Well, the movie is terrible history about Titanic, but I said that made me realize I was gay and loved ships all in one moment. And from that, I bought every book on ships I could. My mother gave me a copy of A Night to Remember, and I remember when I was 7 years old, I got the complete encyclopedic series of books called The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. So anything to do with ships in the sea has been a passion of mine for a long time. And when I worked aboard the ship, I knew it was the realization of a childhood dream. I didn't want to be a passenger. I wanted to work my way around the world by ship. And that was incredible, being part of a crew. Really an amazing experience. So just being on a ship,
you didn't want to dive and go look at wrecks?
No, and I've done that. I've done that. But for me, I think it was the combination of the beauty of ships. And I don't think there's anything to this day more romantic or evocative than being on the deck of a ship, no matter how big or how small, just as you sail out of port and you watch the city or whatever disappear behind you, and there's nothing ahead of you besides water. Even now, it fills me with excitement.
The closest I've seen that is in Edmonds, Washington, going across the ferry.
Oh,
and leaving Edmonds or one of the other.
Yeah,
the other
well,
ports.
that qualifies.
Yeah.
That qualifies.
But it's not an open sea behind me. There's the peninsula.
Yeah.
But we skipped a part. So where did you meet your husband?
My husband and I are one of the early online partnerings, and this was before Tinder or Grindr or Scruff. Wasn't no /right/right. Right. It was an AOL chat room in San Francisco. I had come home. I very much was not looking for a partner. As Alfredo jokes, you were a horny sailor home from the sea. And that was true. And one night in November 1998, I went into the AOL SF Men for Men. And I don't know if you're familiar with it or remember it, but there were no pictures. It was a little chat room, and you could have up to 26 people. And so you would say, hi. And I saw his screen name, which no, I will not reveal. And it piqued my interest, and he saw my screen name, and it piqued his interest. And the next thing you know, we were talking for 5 hours offline. And then the next day, I signed on again, and he said, oh, well, do you have a picture? And he sent me a picture of him. I fell off my chair, picked myself up. And I didn't have a digital picture, but I had a Polaroid taking of me aboard ship in Venice. So I ran down to Kinko's, scanned it, put it on a floppy drive, ran back, stuck it in my Apple computer, and the rest is history. We had our first date on December 1st, and we've been together ever since. We were online lesbians.
And what year was that?
1998. We celebrate our 25th anniversary this year.
So the internet was pretty new then, in 98.
Yes, it was. And I wasn't joking when I said I married up. Alfredo is a techie. He has 2 degrees in computer science. He could and has built computers. He also speaks 5 languages. So it was clear that when we met, it wasn't just physical, although it certainly was. We had a lot in common. We both loved travel, and we loved reading, and we both loved science fiction.
Now, wait a minute. He's a techie, and you don't like texting. What's that about?
No, well, I think it's. I'll tell you exactly what it's about.
All right.
I type really fast. My grandmother made me take typing when I was 15 years old, and I type 140 words a minute. I type wicked fast. I can touch type in the dark. When I took typing, my teacher said, "You play piano, don't you?" I said, "How do you know?" She said, "I can tell. You have the whatever
the fingers to do it.
Yeah, and so I type faster actually than I text. So I think that's why I don't like texting.
Well, the rest of the world's not on that page.
I know. Well, I'm old. Alfredo says you got to get with it.
Listen to your husband. He knows things.
He's always right. Alfredo, I hope you're listening. You're always right. There, I said it.
Oh, what do you like about him?
He's the gentlest, kindest soul I've ever met.
Really?
He's completely empathetic. He's loving. His friends he's just a good soul. He's the kindest person I've ever met.
And you said he's Spanish?
He's Spanish, and yeah, he's also extremely good looking. But
does he have dark eyes?
He has dark hair and dark eyes. Oh. I always fantasized about falling in love with someone whose name ended in O, and this is Alfredo. And our
law of attraction, baby.
Oh my goodness, it was pretty magnetic. Our first meeting, I'll have to say that.
Let's talk about the book.
Thank you.
How did that happen?
So, the short version is in 2014. My husband Alfredo and I lost, in less than a year, our 4 best friends. And they were, to use Armistead Maupin's phrase, our logical family. It was my best friend and mentor, Anthony, who was my first boss at the National Endowment for the Arts when I graduated from college. Our friends Otis and Felipe, and our friend Tom. And Anthony had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and the rest of us were his support network. Well, in the months leading up to his death, Otis and Felipe dropped dead, and Tom dropped dead of a major heart attack a few months before. And
these guys all knew each other?
Yes.
Wow.
And especially Otis, Felipe, and Anthony, and Alfredo and I, we spent literally every weekend together. They were a family. At one point, we even talked about moving in together and having kind of a commune, very San Francisco. And when they died, we were really... It was hard. It was hard. And as I've said, because I think during COVID, a lot of people have admitted to having mental health and emotional issues. And I've never been someone who considered myself depressive. But after losing our 4 best friends in rapid succession, because we were also their caregivers, Anthony moved in with us before he died. We had at-home hospice. And I remember one day, he had died, another friend had had a heart attack, because 2 of them died very close together. And it was Christmas of 2013. And Anthony had just gone to the hospital for the umpteenth time with something. And then our friend Otis had come over. And that next morning, the day after Christmas, he died. And that night...
Was that another heart attack or what?
No, he had been in hospice himself. His partner had died just 3 months before. We think he died of a broken heart. Wow. But it all just came back to me. And I remember driving home with a friend. And I can't even remember that day. And I remember she turned to me and I looked at her. And not only could I not remember what day it was, I couldn't remember what year it was. And as I've said, I don't know what a nervous breakdown is, but I do know that I came as close to it that night as you could. And I went in and I told Alfredo, I don't know. I said, when Anthony dies, we need to take a break. So now fast forward a few months. It was June 2014. And out of the blue, we were at the hospice. And I got an email from a friend who said... Hi. He didn't know what we were going through. Even though I think Facebook is wonderful, that sort of stuff was just too personal. I wasn't sharing it online, although I have nothing against people who do. But a lot of people didn't know what we were going through. And he sent this email and said, do you know anyone who wants to do a house swap? We have a little apartment in Italy. And it all came pouring out in the email. He said, well, don't you want to know where it is? I said, small town, Italy. Sounds terrific. Yeah. So I went into Anthony's hospice room, and he was watching one of our favorite movies on DVD, Tea with Mussolini, which, if you've not seen it, is a wonderful movie based on the childhood of Zeffirelli. And I said, we just got offered a house swap. And he said, when? And I said, November. He said, well, I'll be dead by then. And I said, I know. And he said, where? And I looked up at Tea with Mussolini, and I said, evidently a town very similar to that. And 2 weeks later, he was dead.
Wow.
And in November, Alfredo and I, sight unseen, went to Orvieto with our friend Anthony's ashes in tow, because we were to scatter them someplace that he loved well. And on the day we arrived in Orvieto, November 30th, 2014, we met a local, and she told us the story of a young man named Luca Sedeta, a Catholic deacon, who was 1 week away from ordination when the Vatican denied him the priesthood on the rumor that he was gay. And he was so distraught, he jumped from the cliffs and killed himself. And we arrived on the anniversary of his death.
Wow.
And the town was still talking about it. And I just couldn't, I became obsessed with the story. And that's the inspiration for the novel Upon This Rock.
So that's a basis in there, but it's not just about that. You created a fictional story.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
These two, this young couple with the ashes of their best friend in tow, very much inspired by real life incidents. I was
You're
writing.
in a book.
Pardon me?
You're in a book.
Yeah, well, a character is,
right.
That's the starting off point. And then these two young men discover a mystery, a suicide of a young deacon. Or is it a suicide? And it involves human trafficking, the migrant crisis, which was all over the front pages of Italy at that time, and a conspiracy that seeks to destroy the Catholic Church. And this couple, Lee and Adriano, become very involved in it. And the mystery is solved by the end, but of course I can't tell you.
Why? I know why. Go buy the book.
Go buy the book. Go buy the book.
So it's published, obviously.
It is.
How did you get to having your book published?
I always say
what was the process?
The 3 Ps: persistence, patience, and perkiness.
Okay.
At the time, I was hosting a TV show in San Francisco, and literally every author that came on my show, I'd say, "Who's your publisher?" And I would send off chapters. I was relentless. And I had 2 publishers who responded. And the one who responded first, Pace Press, very prestigious but small house here in California, based in Fresno. They said, "We really like it. We've got the sample chapters, but when you finish it, send us it. We'll publish it." And I got the contract in 2020, just as COVID swept over the world. And I remember thinking, what a terrible time to publish a book. Right. And my publisher, Kent Sorsky, wrote me and said, "Well, I don't know what else is going to come out of this pandemic, but people are reading."
I was just going to say, yeah, they're stuck at home. Yeah.
So the book came out in late 2020. It now, breaking news for your podcast, I just found out this week, speaking with my publisher, it's going into its 2nd printing. It won 2 awards, Best Gay Novel from the San Francisco Book Festival, and Silver Medal from the Independent Book Publishers Association, which is kind of the Oscars of book publishing. And the screenplay is currently being written by a screenwriter in Riverside County with Hollywood credits, Rodney Vance. And the screenplay will be done this year. And then the hard part, selling the screenplay.
Yeah, peddling your, yep.
Yeah,
yep.
I think to me, it's made for Netflix. A wonderful Italian town, wonderful characters, young and old, gay and straight, church intrigue.
Right.
And then the sequel is in the works as well.
So as I recall, you had some Catholic background yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Was that of interest? Is that what got you going on this?
Oh, very much. I very seriously considered the priesthood, and not so much being a pastor.
Right.
I was very fascinated by the monastic life, which my husband Alfredo said I'd been terrible at. The vows of celibacy and silence I couldn't have dealt with. But I really seriously, I was taught by Benedictine monks, and I had and still have a great deal of respect for some of the monastic orders, especially the Benedictines, whose basis is education. So yes, I understood the church. I had wanted to be a priest. And when I stumbled upon this story of a young man who by all accounts was wonderful and beloved, and the people in Orvieto just thought he was the bee's knees, to find out that he just wanted to be a priest, and he was denied that by the Vatican, which is also unusual, and that he killed himself, to me that showed that the church had blood on its hands. Of course, it's got a lot of blood on its hands. Yeah, I don't think I could have written that book if I hadn't had my background as a lapsed Catholic.
Well, obviously you have your history background because you have a lot of details.
Yeah, I love it. The book is full of history. I keep hoping that and actually I do know a number of people have visited Orvieto because they've read the book. And the book has history from the Middle Ages, Pope Clement VII. There's a whole section in there about Pope Clement VII, World War II. It's rich in history. And any of the events that are talked about Upon This Rock that mention a historical event, that's real. The characters are fiction, but the dates are correct.
What's coming down the pike? You're writing another book?
I am. We're about to cross the Atlantic. I'm going to lecture on, as Alfredo says, sunken ships. And I also am doing a series of lectures on writing fiction. The new book is a sequel. It's called Thorns of the 15 Roses. And 3 of the characters in Upon This Rock, Lee and Adriano, kind of the gay thin man, I guess you would say, for those of you who are old enough to remember the Thin Man movie series, husband and husband couple. They're in the sequel, as is a very important, mysterious, I don't want to call her a spy, but a mysterious individual named Magda. They come in the book. And in the same way that Upon This Rock is inspired by a real event, Thorns of the 15 Roses is inspired by a real-life massacre that took place at the beginning of the Spanish Civil War in this little town in Andalusia, Spain called Grazalema, and we'll be there for 2 months, and I'll be working on the book.
Were they just civilians massacred, or who got massacred?
Well, yes, civilians. Actually, there were 14 women and one 14-year-old boy. And
Wow.
they were killed for no reason other than their boyfriends and husbands were anti-fascists. The boy was forced to dig their graves, and then the 14 women were tortured in ways that I'm sure you can imagine, in every possible way to despoil a woman. And then they were hacked to death and thrown in a common grave, and then they threw the boy in it. And the grave was unmarked for many years, although everyone in the town knew about it. And I believe it was 2012, as part of the Spanish law to reclaim, it's called the Historic Memory Law. There are hundreds of these mass graves all over Spain. It's incredible. If you've seen the new Almodovar film, Parallel Mothers, it's all about that. These graves still exist throughout Spain. And this is a tiny town. There are 1,500 people there. And when I heard about the massacre, I became really interested. And it took me 3 trips going there till the town people, they were very kind to me, don't get me wrong. But they're like, oh, here's this poofed American writer writing about this thing. Somehow I could never quite find out where the mass grave. And it wasn't until this last trip that we were taken to it to see it.
Wow.
And now the women have been reinterred in a beautiful memorial in the middle of town, along with the young boy. But they are commonly known in this town as Las 15 Rosas, the 15 roses. So that's the name for my book, Thorns of the 15 Roses.
You gonna write a happy book?
Well, I mean, that's so funny.
So all your friends died, then you went.
Yeah.
All
my friends died. Oh boy, this sounds like a musical comedy. It's Mame.
Wow.
No, Upon This Rock, actually, there's a lot of humor in Upon This Rock. A lot. It's so my favorite review, Fenton Johnson, incredible author, bestseller, Guggenheim Fellow. He called it the gay DaVinci Code, but a lot better. And Will Snyder, a friend of mine from the Bay Area Reporter, reviewed it and said it's got a lot of wit, like the Thin Man series. So the 2 characters, Adriano and Lee, are very witty, but they're dealing with serious subjects. And, nothing against Dan Brown, who wrote many wonderful books. I wish I had his agent and his sales. But to me, there's no humor. And I think it's hard to talk about a suicide or a massacre during the Civil War without having some sort of humor. So I like to think that the characters of Lee and Adriano inject humor and a bit of camp into their solving of these mysteries.
Very cool. So what's the name of your book again?
The book that is currently on sale and being developed as a screenplay is Upon This Rock. And the sequel, which is currently in process, is called Thorns of the 15 Roses.
And the first book, Amazon, good place to find it?
Amazon, Goodreads, or what I like to say is please go to your favorite independent bookseller. Okay. In San Francisco, Best Books Inc. has it. Compass Books, SFO has it. It's a great travel book. In Palm Springs, where I'm recording this now, you can buy it at numerous bookstores. Yeah, support your local bookstore. But Amazon is fine.
Okay, we'll put the links. You choose the links and I'll add them.
All right.
So my last question. You've lived a little bit of life. What are a couple main lessons you've learned about living?
Live in the present moment. I mean, that sounds so California hippy-dippy, but
right.
It really is true. And be kind. One of my favorite phrases is from Khalil Gibran in The Prophet. Of course, I don't speak Arabic, but the English translation is, work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with joy, but only with displeasure, better that you sit at the gates of the temple and beg alms of those who work with joy. I think work is the most important thing if you love it. And if you don't love it, many people are in jobs that make them miserable. And we're not all able to write and do PR or have jobs that we love. There are many people who are unhappy in their work. But what I say is, if you're able at some point to find a way to love your work or do work that you love, everything else comes out of that. So for me, truly, I believe work is love made visible.
Sounds good. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Wilkinson.
Appreciate it.
A great pleasure.
It's been fun. Thanks.